We live in such a fat-phobic society. We're praised for being thin. We're praised for losing weight. And so people thrive off of that praise, and they'll do whatever they can to get to that point. So many people get dismissed. A lot of treatment centers actually require like a specific amount of hospitalizations before you can even be accepted into a treatment center. We're just saying, no, like it could be worse. It could be worse. Come back to us when you've been into the hospital a couple times. Come back to us when your BMI is below a certain number. Come back to us when you can like barely even get yourself out of bed. It is a literal mental illness, and a lot of doctors don't see it as that. They just see it as like a behavior that you just picked up on and you just don't have the willpower to stop.
I'm Ashley.
And I'm Maddie.
And this is the Newport Psycho.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for today. Okay, so we are here with Carly. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Of course, yes. Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Yay.
My name is Carly Compton. I am a psychotherapist. I specialize in eating disorders, body image, self-esteem, self-worth. I'm an eating disorder survivor. I experienced an eating disorder for about 5 to 6 years of my life. And I'm also a content creator, mental health advocate, and own podcast host myself. So yeah,
a little bit of everything.
Boss babe.
Yes.
So, Carly.
Yes.
Who is your psycho?
Or what?
My psycho is eating disorders. My eating disorder.
So I feel like this is so prevalent right now. So I love that we're doing this podcast.
I'm like, I think back to myself and all the weird fad diets that I used to have in high school.
Yeah.
I ate baby food as a diet. Let's get real.
What?
Yeah. Baby food. We can touch on that. Like,
Can
put
you
a pin
even
in
say,
that.
like, in today's society, like, how do you know, like, any statistics? How, like,
Yeah, actually, it's about 28 million Americans will experience an eating disorder in their lifetime. And 10,000 people lose their lives to an eating disorder per year in America. So that's like a death one in every like 52 minutes. Which is
actually insane.
absolutely
Dude, I have
wild.
like chills all over my body thinking about that.
I guess I figured it was more nowadays, or at least it's more known. Like, people talk about it more, at least.
Right.
But like, I didn't know how impactful it really is. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's actually the eating disorders have the second highest mortality rate of any like mental health disorder, right after opioid abuse.
Wow.
Opioid addiction.
And we hear the crazy thing is we hear about opioid abuse so much. Like, people are
Like, we broadcast
very
that,
big-
I feel like,
yeah,
you know?
like, people are really big advocates of, like, you know, and like, this is right underneath that. That's,
it's right there, right behind it, and it's not talked about, and it's so normalized in our society, which we'll talk a lot throughout this episode of like the difference in disordered eating and eating disorders, and understanding sort of where that line is drawn. But because we live in such a fat-phobic society, right, eating disorders are so incredibly normalized. So people go their whole lives thinking that their eating disorder is okay, that it's not deadly, that it's not causing them physical harm, until they're in the hospital. And it's almost too late, because we're praised for being thin. We're praised for losing weight. And so people thrive off of that praise, and they'll do whatever they can to get to that point.
sustain it.
It's like your image. It's like, I mean, I'm totally at fault of doing this, where like I gained 5 pounds and I feel like the ugliest thing in the world. And I feel like sometimes I have to like clock myself back.
It's like, oh my God, it's the end of the world, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I gained weight. Oh my God, people are going to notice. Oh my God, like, I'm so lazy. I'm so worthless. Like, those are the things that we're sort of like taught.
Yeah, we let
about
it like
weight.
define us. It's so true. I mean, even myself, like, I know that, like, if I have something coming up, like, I'll do like a juice cleanse.
Yeah.
By the way, I did not even know what juice cleanses were until I moved to Newport Beach.
Thank you, Newport.
I went crazy on them. I went crazy on them because, like, all my patients were doing it, and they're like, "Oh, just do a juice cleanse." And I'm like, "What the hell is that?"
Yeah.
And then I go and get one, and then I became addicted, and now I literally cannot drink juice it makes me like
sick.
Well, like it makes me sick because I overdid
It's actually very true because
Yeah.
we have done this where she's like, she can't even look at like a juice.
I'm so sorry. Like they'll be like, do you want?
You like hyper fixated on it.
Yes, and I
for
can't.
so long.
It makes me think of like, oh my gosh, I can't do it. It makes me sick.
Yeah.
So as far as like education goes, what is your degree in?
So my undergrad, my bachelor's is in elementary education.
Okay.
But I recently got my master's of social work. So my MSW.
Love it.
Girl.
Yeah. And so that is what has allowed me to be in the field of psychotherapy, mental health.
Love it.
If you follow me on Instagram, you know I'm very passionate about social justice and sort of combining social work, body image, mental health in with social justice stuff.
Love it.
So social work allows me to do that. So yeah, bachelor's in education, master's in social work. And I sort of tried to find a way to combine those two through, I developed an eating disorder curriculum for adolescents. So that's sort of how I combine my undergrad with my sort of like master's experience.
Amazing. And so how long would you say you've been practicing since getting your
Yeah, so
master's?
I have been, the practice I'm currently at, I've been at since 2022. 2021, I interned there the last year of my master's, and then they hired me on full time after I graduated. So I've been there since 2022, practicing like individual psychotherapy specifically.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So with MSW, with therapy, you have to do 3,000 supervised hours, which is about 2 years.
I was gonna say, how
Dude,
many
my
years is
best
that?
friend,
Yeah.
one of my best friend's a marriage and family therapist, and let me tell you, she's gone told me
Yes.
all the things. It's a lot of
It's
work.
a lot of
I get
work.
dedicated
It's
to
a lot
all
of time, which I understand because it is such a delicate area of work. Like
Yeah.
you really have to, I mean, you're sort of guiding people through their mental health, and you are guiding people through suicidal ideation, like all of those sort of things. Like you need to be really experienced and have a lot of experience in that. So once you finish your hours, then you take your licensing exam and you become a licensed clinical social worker, which then lets you sort of do your own private practice. And you don't necessarily have to be working under a supervisor anymore.
That's a lot of work. Congratulations, girl.
Yeah,
That's
you.
That's like
Yeah.
And speaking of like background, you said that you actually had an eating disorder yourself. Can
I did.
You kind of get into that? Like, when did it start? Like, what did you go through? Like, kind of walk us through it.
Yeah. So growing up, I was always like the chubbier of all my friends. I was always a little chunky, and I remember hearing constantly from like my grandparents and my parents, the baby weight. Like,
Oh my gosh,
and I was
that
like,
was
when
so in
am
my
I going
family
to
too.
lose my
Everybody
baby
always
weight?
says
Like,
that.
Everybody
Baby fat,
always
baby
says it,
fat.
baby fat. You're gonna lose your baby fat.
Side note,
Yeah.
you're freaking stunning, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
are
I
beautiful.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I can so connect with that because my family still to this day, the adolescents in my family still get told like, oh, it's just baby fat.
Baby
They'll grow
fat.
out of it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I still got my baby
I still
fat.
have my baby fat.
Like,
but
when
I'm
is it gonna go
not a
away?
baby anymore? Yeah. So that's something that I sort of always heard. And then I reached a point where I was like, okay, I'm in middle school now. And like, I'm not a baby, sort of like yours. I'm not a baby anymore. Like, but I still like my body still looks this way. And I always felt very different than my friends in terms of like where I could shop and the types of clothes that I would wear. Like we would go shopping at like Justice.
Oh,
Yeah.
gosh, I remember that.
Yep, I remember.
And I remember being like, God, all these clothes are like so tight. They're so small. My cousin was a fit model for Justice.
Yep.
I was always in that space of like, we were also really close in age, my cousin and I. So I was always looking at her. I was always comparing myself to her. So I just inherently developed this sort of like critical thought process around my body. My mom also struggled with her relationship with her body, still does to this day, but growing up hearing her talk about her body and like the things that she would say about herself, I held on to that, and those sort of like shaped what we call in therapy like my core beliefs and my sort of like automatic thoughts around just how we as women think about our bodies. So it was sort of that start of that like normalization for me.
Yeah, I feel like women, we're so hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
We are
Like truly,
so hard
like
on ourselves.
as you're
Yeah.
speaking, as I'm like listening to what you're saying, there's like little moments in my brain where I think to myself like, I've definitely been that woman that looks in the mirror and like pinpoints every flaw.
Yeah.
And you have to like learn. I've been in years of therapy to learn how not to feel like that.
Yeah.
And to maybe think more positively.
Yeah.
And it's just really sad.
Yeah. It's sort of like what you were
this,
saying at the beginning of like our worth being being attached to the size of our body.
Yeah.
Just as a society, that's sort of what that's what we've been taught, is that specifically as women, obviously men, non-binary individuals experience like difficulties with body image and eating disorders, but like women in particular, it's like the thinner you are, the more attractive you are, the more successful you'll be. Like, you know, all of these pieces always circle back to your body and the size of your body. And so that piece definitely played a huge role in the development of my eating disorder. And my eating disorder started around 9th grade in high school, but I had been struggling with my body way before that. I had done every diet, Slim Fast, like
oh my
all
gosh,
the
yes,
things.
yes, the shakes,
all the shakes.
We've all done
those.
Chalk. I
know. Yes.
Oh gosh, they were disgusting.
Yeah.
like the chocolate, the vanilla, and then people would come out. Oh,
so bad.
And
Yeah.
I have like PTSD from the taste.
Yeah, you're like,
you
so
can, like,
bad.
You could
Yes.
taste it.
Yeah. So I did all the things, and then it was actually no, it was like junior year of high school, was when I overheard someone talking about a girl in my school who had lost a bunch of weight, and they were saying that it was from an eating disorder, and they were like, yeah, she specifically experiences bulimia. And I didn't even know what that was.
I was gonna say, for those who don't know, what is bulimia?
So there's a couple different eating disorders. We have anorexia, we have bulimia, we have binge eating disorder. And then we also have orthorexia, which is one that's not as much talked about, which is like an obsession with food, calories, exercising. It's sort of like you can't eat anything without knowing exactly what's in it, how many calories are in it. That's sort of like that obsession piece. So that's orthorexia.
Like I have that now. This is all.
Orthorexia is like it's very common. It's also one of the most normalized eating disorders.
I actually I'm kind of mind blown because I feel like I do this every single day.
We both do. We both do that.
Yeah.
Well, and there's
we
like
actually
a difference
feed off of each other. Like we're just gonna be super authentic.
Yeah.
Here. I feel like we feed off of each other. Like, oh, we can't eat that.
Yeah.
Like that has that in there. Or like we try to like stay really healthy.
Yeah, we both like keep each other. We think we keep each other accountable, but we're probably adding to the problem.
Yeah. And that's the part that's so confusing. And I think I always like to distinguish the difference in like wanting to be like caring about what you're putting in your body, like being aware of like, okay, am I ingesting toxic ingredients that are going to be bad for me, but also like when does that start to become like controlling in a way? When does like it almost become this fear of like, if I eat this thing this one time, like it's the end of the world, right?
Yeah,
so where it's like this control piece.
It's like people like they choose not to eat fast food for health benefits.
Yeah.
Versus if you if you're out with your family and you have like a meal and
you're like
you're
okay with that.
and you're okay with it,
Yeah.
and these people are feeling awful about it.
Exactly.
Like it literally makes them like depressed.
It's like now I need to go to the gym. Now I need to like
okay.
work off what I just ate. Like
Got
all
it.
of those sort of pieces.
Like the obsession.
The obsession
Yes.
piece.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like this deep rooted fear of specific foods or weight gain or really anything like that. So that would be what orthorexia is considered, would be considered. I experienced bulimia. This friend that I just referenced also experienced bulimia, and bulimia is basically you eat something. Sometimes it involves binging, not always. Clinically, they like to consider the binge part before they give the diagnosis. I didn't experience binging. I just experienced the purging aspect of bulimia. So that is whatever you eat, no matter what you eat, you always have to like purge that food in some way.
So basically, like you're just
so you're either throwing up, or people will do like laxatives.
Yep.
So that would be what bulimia is considered. So I overheard this friend say, she's experienced bulimia. She's lost all this weight. She looks incredible. I went home and I like Googled bulimia, and I was like, oh my God, this is so doable. this just tells you where I was mentally in terms of like how badly I wanted to be thin and lose weight. Is I was like, this is so doable. I can still eat. No one's going to notice that I'm not eating. I can just go to the bathroom after work. Like it was such a terrible headspace to be in. But I was desperate. Like I was so desperate to lose weight, to be thin. So that was sort of the starting point of my eating disorder. I really only experienced bulimia. I can't not eat. I love food so much. So like not eating. So anorexia wasn't really something that was attainable for me. There was some orthorexia in there as well, just naturally with
of course
an eating disorder.
Yeah, you're good.
And then binge eating, I didn't really experience binge eating disorder at all. So bulimia was really the main one that I experienced. And I battled that until about my junior year of college. So about 6 years.
That's a while. That's like a while.
Yeah.
And you said prior to that too, being like younger, you had the body
I had body dysmorphia, definitely negative relationship with my body. And then I started actually experiencing physical symptoms of my eating disorder in college. So I had my hair was falling out. I had very low energy. Didn't matter how much I slept, how much caffeine I drank. Like my energy was super low. Of course it was. My body was like malnourished.
Because you're getting rid of everything.
I was getting rid of everything. My throat was constantly burning
from the
acid. And so those are like the symptoms that people don't talk about when we talk about eating disorders, are like these really intense symptoms. People will lose their teeth. People will people's gums will rot. People
because of
all of the acid. Yeah. People will have like gastrointestinal issues for the rest of their life because of their eating disorder. So there's like these big pieces that people don't talk a lot about. Fertility, like wanting to have a baby, like eating disorders impact your fertility and whether you have a baby or not in the future, which people don't know about either. So it's like there's these
so many
really big pieces, that impact someone's just
and you
overall
think,
life.
I'm just trying to get skinny. Like I'm just gonna throw this up, and like you don't really understand. Especially when you're young, we don't. I mean, I even think about like things that I did like when I was younger, and like how I really wish I wouldn't have done them because it's like it's impacted me as an adult.
Yeah,
and so it's like
what?
Well, I mean, for instance, I used to do fitness competitions when I was 21, and I actually had an eating disorder myself, and I didn't really realize it until I was going through it. Like afterwards, it ruined relationships. Like me and like the boy I was with, you know, it was awful. And I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was psycho. Like I was psycho. Like I'd literally wake up. I had an internship at the ICU. So I'd be at the hospital. We started shift at 7. I would wake up at 3:30 in the morning to go do an hour of fasted cardio. And then after that, I would go home. I only made egg whites and sweet potatoes, and they had no seasoning. I'd eat that. I only ate, like I portioned out every single one of my meals to the T. Like if I ate one extra bite, the orthorexia got into me where I was like, oh my God, I have to do at least 5 more minutes of cardio. Then after I got off my 12-hour shift, I would go do more cardio, lift weights, and do it all again. And I mean, I let it control my life where like you get so skinny, and I'm not saying anything against people that do those competitions. I just myself, like it made me I used to binge. I used to where like I would work out like crazy, and then like literally I was like wait till my cheat meal of the week, and I'd go insane, and then I'd feel like shit afterwards, and I'd literally go do cardio or I'd make myself throw up, because I felt awful. Like and I saw myself on stage, first of all, malnourished, dehydrated. I didn't drink water that day, so I would look skinny.
You can't.
I saw the weight on the scale. And I saw how I looked, and I like loved it, even though, you know, the person I was with, my family was like, this doesn't look right. You don't look healthy. Yeah. To me, it was like, oh my gosh, like this is what I want to look like. And so I knew all it took to get there, and I didn't want to rebound. So it's like I kept up with it even after the competition, and I had an unrealistic expectation of what my body should look like on a normal basis. And it's like, it wasn't reality. Like you can't only eat tilapia and asparagus the rest of your life. Like,
dude,
now
absolutely
that I think about,
not. No, absolutely not.
And now that I think, and now it's so funny, I think of tilapia and I literally can't. But like, you know, I remember going to ice cream with my boyfriend and I would lie to him and I'd be like, my stomach hurts, and I'd go in the bathroom and I'd throw up. Like, it's because I didn't think I deserved it. And I would literally do now. So now I don't have it because I know, like, when I go out to dinner with my friends and stuff and I eat, I'm like, whatever. You know what I'm saying? I don't go to cardio afterwards. I don't care. But it took me a really freaking long time to get there.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, I'd throw up and he'd be like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah. And I'd literally go to the gym the next day and I would do like 3 hours of cardio. Like, I would do an hour and a half before and an hour and a half after. And just to make sure that, like, I burned off what I ate because I didn't deserve it. Like, I was like, no, I can't do this or I'm going to get fat.
Yeah.
It's just so bad for your, it's like so bad for your mental.
It's a total mental, like, oh yeah. And I remember I was 21 and it's like, you know, or 22 when I did it. And it's probably stuck with me till, like, it took me like a very long time to eat like normal, probably like 25, 26. And I mean, I probably honestly was like, I was with this person for a really long time. And I mean, that was probably like one of the reasons that like it kind of tore us apart. You know what I'm saying? Because like it's awful. Like,
for sure.
We couldn't go to dinner unless I was like, oh, it's this certain day because I work out real, like, it's Saturday and I can work out 3 hours before, but that's the only thing we're doing. Or like, you know what I'm saying? We'd like plan around my cheat meals, and it's like, that's like not a like.
And it's kind of like we almost like self-sabotage these relationships.
I was about to say that. I was about to say, it's like the signs that
family,
you're talking about.
Exactly,
like
yeah.
the things that we don't realize. Like, I know you had mentioned, like, you know, stomach lining, health issues like that, but little things that we don't realize that bleed into our daily lives.
Yeah.
Just like your relationship.
Yeah.
Your relationship, friendships,
work, my family. Like, oh my gosh, my poor family. They probably like, I was not fun to be around. I was not fun to be around.
You were like a
it's
monster.
all consuming, right?
Yeah.
It consumes every aspect of your life.
Totally.
And that's the really difficult thing with eating disorders when we're looking at like navigating through like the recovery process is it's like we have to eat, like food has to be a part of our lives. We have to eat to survive, right? So we can't just like, it's not something we can just like remove. So if we're like comparing it to like drugs or something, right? Like someone can like have drugs removed from their environment. We can't remove food from our environment.
No.
So it's like,
No.
we have to we're almost forced to find a way to like have some form of a healthy relationship with food, knowing that it's going to be something that we have to be around. We have to be literally around it for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads me to my next question. So like, what are the signs of someone with ED? Like, I know we've kind of touched like little bases.
Yeah, I know there's like obviously
like,
different
signs.
different eating disorders, like you said.
Yeah.
But like, what are like the common signs that like maybe we just are kind of like blind to?
Well, I think it's important to distinguish the difference in disordered eating and eating disorders, because what happens is a lot of times an individual starts off with this disordered relationship with food. So it can just be a fear of carbs. So like you don't eat carbs, you don't eat sugar, you don't eat specific foods because of this fear that we were talking about earlier.
Or like you start on one of those diets, like Weight Watchers or whatever, and it's like, or like you stop keto or whatever.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you start one of these diets and it starts to sort of become this like obsession in a way, right? And I always like to distinguish disordered eating and eating disorders are very different, but they can disordered eating can become an eating disorder.
Okay.
But that's not always going to be the case, right?
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's hard because I work on the clinical side of things. And so I'm always having to look at like the DSM-5, which is our diagnosis manual that we use in mental health, right? So each eating disorder has the specific criteria that an individual needs to meet in order to get that diagnosis. Just like generalized anxiety or depression, like there's certain criteria you need to meet. I really struggle because I do feel like a lot of the criteria is very outdated. It also sort of promotes this like extreme aspect of an eating disorder. So an individual can have like symptoms, but like according to the DSM, if it's not quote unquote severe enough, then they're not going to get that diagnosis.
Then they don't have the disorder. They're just
so technically. So
I
for
remember
me,
this in school now.
Yeah. So when I work with clients, I take the DSM into consideration, but I'm not saying, okay, you meet XYZ and it's to this severity, so yes, you do have an eating disorder. It's, no, can we look at your symptoms? Can we look at how often they're occurring, how severely they're occurring, how long they've been going on for? And then from there, it's like, okay, this is definitely going to qualify as an eating disorder.
Yeah.
So maybe, do like people, can they still have an eating disorder but be on like the lower end of the spectrum?
Yeah,
like,
you can,
but they won't be like viewed as it with the, like, I'm saying this from the
yeah.
DSM-5.
Yeah, so you can, I mean, there's like mild, moderate, and severe, right?
Okay.
So there's the different categories of kind of where you fall. It also is difficult because it depends on the clinician that you're seeing.
Okay.
Right? Some clinicians are going to follow the DSM word for word, and they're going to say, nope, like you can't have this diagnosis unless you meet these criteria. Other clinicians are going to be like, no, this is definitely pretty bad. Like, this is going to be considered, we're going to consider this like an eating disorder. So it just depends. And I think that's what's so confusing and sort of frustrating with just like the medical field as a whole.
Yeah.
Is like, some people are so by the book, like,
That's what it's like. What I'm thinking. That's what I was trying to get out.
Some people are so black
It's
and
like
white,
they get
and then
missed.
other people,
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
if you're in that gray, like, we still,
Yeah. So for example, like with anorexia, there's like a BMI requirement. So an individual has to have like a specific BMI to get that diagnosis.
Body mass index.
Body
for
mass
those
index.
Of you that don't know.
For anyone. Yeah. So like you have to be a certain weight essentially in order to get that diagnosis. Any clinician who has sort of worked with individuals in different body sizes knows that anorexia can occur in individuals in larger bodies. There should not be a weight requirement.
Yeah,
for
no,
that,
I
because-
like
for that
100%
diagnosis.
agree.
What
It's not
is
just because
your-
you see somebody that looks like this that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
actually, there's like, I feel like there's like, I don't know if it's a thing, but like reverse anorexia, because I have cousins that were just like always tiny, tiny. And I always felt bad when people were like, do you eat?
Yeah.
Do you eat? And they're like, yes, I eat. Like,
Yeah.
I also feel bad on that end of the spectrum
So
too.
there's also like atypical anorexia, which in the Health at Every Size, which is the framework that I follow as a clinician,
Yeah.
in that field, that is a very frowned upon idea of like, are you a typical, do you have typical anorexia or do you have atypical anorexia? It should just be anorexia. It should not,
because now you're making me feel bad for being like atypical
so,
if they
so
are.
that happens. So people
Yeah.
are like, well, I'm not thin enough. Like I haven't lost enough weight. Like it's not severe enough. So it's very dismissive for a lot of people. So that is like a big issue we see in the eating disorder field, is so many people get dismissed because they live in a larger body, because they're a person of color, because they're a certain age, because they're a certain gender. People get dismissed, and it's like, no, like you're good, right? Like you're good. A lot of treatment centers actually require like a specific amount of hospitalizations before you can even be accepted into a treatment center.
That is so frustrating.
There's all of these like really, really, really frustrating pieces that just perpetuate sort of the cause of even why these eating disorders are starting to begin with.
We're just like not even like, I feel like that's so crappy because we're not even helping.
Exactly.
Like we're not even helping.
We're just saying, no, like
putting
it
a
could be
Band-Aid
worse.
on it. Yeah, like
it
here
could
you
be
go.
worse. Come back to us when you've been into the hospital a couple times. Come back to us when your BMI is below a certain number. Come back to us when you can like barely even get yourself out of bed.
ends up being
That's why
where
the
you
death rate
end up
is
die.
right below like the opioid.
Because
like,
people
crisis.
don't go to the hospital and get care.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because they like,
They don't. What do you?
and people
here,
hide
I'm
it
thinking-
very well.
Well, and I'm thinking you walk in like, hey, like I binge eat, like I'm a closet eater.
Yeah.
Like how do you walk in for that? Like there's also like a mental
usually
thing.
other people that push you to go, or
100%.
admit.
Or you say, I experience binge eating disorder, and you're seeing a doctor who isn't eating disorder, who doesn't have any experience in eating disorders,
Right.
Who's just going to say, well, just eat less,
Yeah.
right?
Literally,
And
it's just like black and white.
or just eat more.
yeah. Thanks, doc.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
Did you go to school for that?
Exactly. So there
came
have
up with
literally
that.
been, I've had clients who have come in and said, like, they have medical trauma because they've gone in to see doctors regarding these
help.
things, and they've been dismissed. They've been told, just eat less, just eat more, stop
Golly.
thinking about, because there's not that understanding of like the mental health aspect, the mental illness aspect of an eating disorder. Like, it is a literal mental illness, and a lot of doctors don't see it as that. They just see it as like a behavior that you just picked up on and you just don't have the willpower to stop.
So they're kind
And
of
it's
thinking like you're almost like weak-minded is
Yeah.
kind of what I'm thinking. Some of these doctors are like, they're just so like black and white
Yeah.
that they're just like, go eat more spaghetti, like go eat more carbs, or don't eat it,
Yeah.
you know? But that kind of leads me to a question of like mental health, like mental illness. I feel like society right now, we need to like figure this out, because mental health is like the forefront. I mean, I know I have my best friend that's in this realm as well, but mental health is such a forefront in our everyday lives. Like, how can you kind of maybe navigate like my thoughts that are like flowing in my head right now with mental health? Like just like general, like how, like obviously with ED, there's a lot of mental health, but just in everyday lives, relationships, ED.
I mean, it
things
kind
like
of
that.
goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, we all have to eat food. Food has to
Right.
be, we all have brains. We all have
Right.
minds, and that we have to live with and navigate every day. So a lot of times, I mean, the first thing that I always say to people when we're talking about mental health is like, we have to remove the stigma around mental health. There
Yeah.
is so much shame and stigma around having any sort of mental health diagnosis, or even just struggling with your mental health at all. Specifically for like men, right? Like, don't talk about it, keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
Like, and that's not the answer. That's not the solution. So I think even just starting the conversation by just being vulnerable with someone about how you're feeling and how long you've been feeling it and what support you need. And then finding a professional to help you sort of navigate through that, because mental health is really hard to do alone. Like, navigating your mental health is really hard to do alone. Unfortunately, it's not accessible to everyone. Some people can't afford it. Some people don't have insurance. Like, it's very expensive. It's very hard to find good clinicians who aren't going to cause you more harm, unfortunately, than they will good. A lot of my clients have been to 4 or 5 different therapists, and they've had these really terrible experiences with clinicians. And so I think that piece also makes people hesitant to get support and get help is, well, I've tried it once or I've tried it twice and it was really bad. Why would I want to put myself through that again? Which is so valid.
Yeah. And obviously the cost of it too.
Yeah.
Like, why like go through that when you're obviously not getting anything out of it,
when you're not getting,
and
what
then
you
you're
need.
also like kind of like you feel, because I've had this happen to me where I've been through a couple therapists as well, and I'm just like, holy moly, like I just spent a lot of money on that, and I just felt like I got absolutely nothing out of it.
Well, and then you're like, am I like in such a bad place that like no one can help me?
That's gone through my head.
So people are like, I'm not deserving of help, or I'm not worthy of finding someone who can help me, or I'm just like too far gone, which is, where we see the like suicide rates in the US of people who are just like, clearly no one can help me. No one can fix me, quote unquote, fix me. And they just feel like there's no other solution.
Is there any like, that's what I was going to ask you, like, is there any like programs or like, there's a suicide hotline, obviously, like that.
Yeah.
Is there any like free outreach programs or anything like that people can do? Or like, let's say like I'm a family member and I'm concerned about somebody, like what would they do? Is they just
like for anybody with mental health?
Yeah, they just have to try to find like
Well, there's definitely organizations. So like NAMI, the National Association of Mental Illness, I believe is NAMI is their acronym. They are a place where you can always find like groups, virtual groups, any like community piece of things. I always like to recommend like trying to find free groups first for people, specifically like in the eating disorder world. There's a lot of free like support groups.
Oh, that's great. See, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So,
and so
you
like
know,
with
that's actually
virtual,
really
you
great.
can have your camera off and you can, you know, like you don't have to engage and like you can sit there and like just sort of get comfortable in that space. That's one thing with COVID is that a lot of this stuff became accessible virtually, which is really great. Is people don't have to drive somewhere. They don't have to like be in person if they're really intimidated.
They can be like the comfort of their own home.
Exactly. They can be in the comfort of their home. They can have their camera turned off. They can, you know, just sort of listen to people. But it creates that sense of like community and also like validation of like, I'm not alone. There's other people who are also experiencing this, and there are professionals who want to help us and who want to create a space for us to be able to just like kickstart that journey.
I do know that my therapist did mention this to me one time, and it always made sense to me. And she's like, we can only help so much too with what you share, because you can't ask somebody to just be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like you decide. Like my therapist was like, you know, sometimes I'll have clients that come in session and they won't talk to me for 6 months, and then all of a sudden it's like they start to word vomit everything that's been going on, and then they start to get to a place. Or, you know, I've even felt like this when I've connected with friends that have gone to therapy as well, and they like lie about some of the things that are happening, and they're not truthful, and they're getting not the valid advice that they should to make them better in their journey with mental health.
Yeah.
And so
well,
it's
and
so
that's also
interesting.
that's like part of the therapist role too, is to create a space in which the client feels comfortable. And that's a big part of the therapist job too, is like the client needs to feel like you're not going to judge them.
Exactly.
The client needs to feel like you're not going to like make a facial expression or like go tell like there needs to be a sense of safety in session, and that is a big part of the therapist's job. Of course, we can only do so much, and we can't force people to tell us things they don't want to tell us, but we have to trust that at some point they will develop that like comfortability, and hopefully those things will be opened up about.
I mean, I give it to you. You therapists have it like what I think, which is probably ignorant to think like you listen to people's problems all day. Like I also like have to give a shout out to all the therapists out there, because holy moly, like it's a lot to take on every day. Like I said, my best friend's one, love you, you know who you are. But I have to give it to you guys. But along the lines of just society in a nutshell, like we have social media, we have filters, we have
AI,
all of
like,
these things. AI that's like now coming out, where there's on Instagram now,
like everything, like
Instagram now, there's pages of fake men and women that are like have millions of followers on these Instagram accounts, and it just like mind blows me. What's your thought process on that helps with all that?
I always tell people, I'm like, everything you take in online, you have to take in with a grain of salt, because you cannot trust what you're looking at. You can't trust what you're watching. You can't trust, like, you have to really go into social media with this idea of like, I'm not seeing this person's life like in real life. Like,
and
I don't know
what they look like in person.
Yeah, and I also don't know the backstory. I don't know, what they're dealing with, what they're experiencing.
True.
Right? Which is why, navigating, like having like media literacy and like really understanding how to navigate social media in that way is so important.
That's interesting. Media literacy. I don't think I've ever
I
heard
love
that.
I mean, it makes me think of like, obviously, like I'm an aesthetic injector, and people will come and they're like, I want to look like this girl. Like I want her jawline. And I'm like,
as I'm like, oh, there's a piece of
oh yeah, right. Get it. I'm like, that's not a real jawline. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like that's totally like like there's no way, like, or it's just an unrealistic expectation.
Yeah.
Or like, I want my lips to look like this, and they'll show me them with the filter, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's not real, but like that's what we want, and we see ourselves what it can look like, and we're like, oh my gosh, that's what I want to be. But like on the like other end of this, like I feel like even though like in today's society we do have like these filters, things like that, I feel like body like empowerment is bigger than it's ever been as well. I mean, like I know that like, just for instance, like Khloe Kardashian is big with it, like with her jeans, like she wants it to be able to fit like all sizes and have every woman feel beautiful. Do you feel like obviously there's the negative end, but do you feel like it has started to, level up with like accepting people who they are?
I think in a way, I think that we were making like New York Fashion Week just happened, and I have a lot of friends who are plus size models and influencers who attended New York Fashion Week who were saying like how disappointed they were in the lack of body inclusivity that they saw on the runways.
Shut up. That's
at
really
all of these
sad.
shows. So there was like, we've seen this increase.
Yeah, but then
we're also noticing it's decreasing again.
So it's like ebbs and flows of this.
Yeah, we're also seeing the rise in like Ozempic and all these weight loss drugs.
Yes.
That are also bringing back these like, heroin chic and like all of these different body types that used to be super big that are now
low-rise jeans.
like low-rise jeans. Like we're seeing
oh gosh, I can't ever bring those back. I don't
we're seeing all these trends come back.
Yeah.
Which if we're looking at like trends and social media, like there is a direct impact in the way that we navigate body image based on trends in social media. Like those are two of the biggest impacts on body image and mental health, just like in general. And so I think we've made progress in some capacities. I think there's a lot less stigma around talking about it. And like we see a lot more like plus size creators and stuff like that, but there is still like this systemic piece of things where plus size creators are being shadow banned and like there's
Are you serious?
Oh
like,
yeah,
they're getting shamed for sure.
I like suck at social media, but I
you'll
saw
see
that.
people like plus size models, all that, and then people will be like, how are we supposed to support them being unhealthy? And it's like, we don't know if they're unhealthy. My thing is like, if it's one thing to be like eating like fast food all the time and stuff like that and like not be healthy and be overweight, but like if you're naturally like a heavier set or whatever and you're like eating healthy and you're taking care of your body, like that's just who you are. Like,
but I also always tell people that I'm like, it's not my, like, who am I to tell someone that they need to be healthy
100%.
or not healthy, right? Like, if I'm scrolling social media and I see someone eating something, like, my first instinct isn't to, like, go on there and, like, be like, oh my God, you should be eating this instead. Like, that's not my place to tell someone whether they should be consuming healthy food or not.
On social media make it their place.
Yeah.
My first thing is I was like, dang, that looks good.
Right?
I know, I'm like, hey, where'd you get that?
Yeah.
But no, it's so true because it's like, you're right. Like, we were seeing, like, I did see, like, certain people write comments, like, how can we, like, support this person, like, that's so unhealthy? And it's like, we don't know anything about them.
We don't know anything about them. We don't know their behaviors. We also, I think, have to learn that, like, health is so much more than, like, physical health. Like, we have spiritual health, mental health, emotional health. Like, there's all of these different pillars of health.
PTL.
And so as a society, we automatically assume someone's health based on their physical appearance or like what they do, how often they go to the gym or what they eat. But we're not taking into consideration any of these other pieces.
And we're not, it's not getting shamed on people that are like skinny. Nobody's writing on there and like, how could we support this unhealthy person? Right?
Yeah. Which we also don't know what their behaviors are
that's
either.
What I'm saying.
Right?
Like, we don't know either, but it's just, I feel like.
Because honestly, the person who is considered overweight is probably healthier than the person who is super tiny and considered
they don't get
fit.
As much backlash, you know? I'm
sure
they get some.
I saw that in my eating disorder experience. I got so much praise. The more weight I lost, the more praise I got, the more like worth people saw in me.
Yeah.
And as I was going through my recovery, I'm like, okay, my body's changing, I'm gaining weight, like, but I'm also healthier than I've ever been. My relationship with food is healthy, the healthiest it's ever been. I can move my body in ways that I was never able to move my body, but because I've gained weight, people automatically assume I let myself go, I don't care about my health anymore. So it's just this like stereotype that as a society we have to unlearn. And we also have to stop teaching because it's taught, right? It's taught in medical school, it's taught like in all of these different areas.
We only like, I mean, I went to obviously Western medicine and it's like we based it off of like BMI. And it's like, how is that even still a thing? Like my boyfriend who's like athletic fit, he's
Yeah.
obese.
Yeah,
And I'm
exactly.
like, there's
Yeah.
like, if you see this man, you're like, there's no way. Like, you know what I'm saying?
My
But, like,
brother would be the same. Like
Yeah,
if you
you
actually
know,
like let him on his
but
scale,
he works out
but he's shredded.
Yeah,
They're
it's
both,
great.
like,
But
great.
it's like we base it off of that, and it's like I remember at one point, like even what I am now, I was considered like average or whatever, like you know what I'm saying, or like overweight or whatever, and I was like, what the hell?
Yeah. I
Like-
used to go home every day after school, and I would go on my computer, like in middle school and high school, and I would go to, because you could like pull up a BMI calculator. You could Google
Yeah.
like BMI
Yeah.
calculator technically.
Yep.
I remember that.
And
I've done it.
I would put in different weight. I would put in my height, and I would put in all these different weights. And that would be sort of what would determine, okay, this is how much weight I need to lose. This is my goal weight, because I was trying to get that like underweight sort of
Look.
BMI answer essentially. And yeah, we're always going to have these issues if we're still using tools that like BMI that are so outdated, and that also just like perpetuate the sort of like fat phobic ideas around bodies. That's not going to change unless we change all of these other pieces.
Well, we got to change so many things. I feel like it's obviously social media is so huge. Like I feel like that's the number. I feel like for me that's like number one. It's like you can go on there and I could feel bad about myself in like 0.5 seconds.
Yeah, you have comparison at your fingertips.
Yeah.
Gosh,
Like
yeah.
you can, and then you find the accounts that you like compare yourself. Like I have clients who are like, I'm hyper fixated on these couple of accounts, and they'll go to those accounts and like see what the person's doing, because they're just like constantly comparing themselves to that person, because there's like a small part of them that's like, I could be that.
Yeah.
And maybe if I like watch this person enough, like
You
I
become
can
that.
become that.
Yeah, I can become that.
Yeah.
So that's where obsession.
But
like,
that's just like the
comes
whole
from.
thing is what you're getting at is it's not always rainbows and butterflies. What people post on social media is a tenth of what their actual life is.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we don't know like what they're doing behind like closed doors, you know? We don't know what they're struggling with.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just honestly, it just makes me sad to like really hear all of this kind of thing. Cause I just think of personally myself where I've been at in different aspects of my life. And then I think of friends, I think of family members, I think of colleagues, and like looking back and like just learning a bunch of knowledge from you here. I'm just thinking like, gosh, like I have been there, done that. And it's really,
and I
like,
love that you
sad.
came on too, because you know, you opened up our minds, and not only that, but like the minds of our viewers, that like it can be like just because you're a certain way, everybody can have an eating disorder, no matter what like ethnicity,
Oh.
what age, what weight, you know, what body comp, like
Yeah.
anything, it can affect anybody. And obviously it's very like prevalent.
Yeah.
What's the youngest like adolescent? Like in my head, I'm like, what's the youngest person that you've ever?
So statistically, well, I actually saw a really interesting statistic that there was a 119% increase in eating disorders within adolescents within like the last 5 years.
Why do we feel like that's from?
Social media,
But, like, what's the
specifically
age?
social media. I have seen eating disorders starting in around 4th grade.
Oh.
So I don't know.
That's like
how
what
is that,
considered like what 10?
Yeah, I
like
guess
10?
adolescent is, well, I don't
Yeah,
know the
that's like
exact
10.
age
10.
range. I don't
10,
know the
10 turning 11.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could just say under 18 in the sense. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So, I mean,
Adolescent would be under 18, but she's talking about like 4th grade would
Yeah.
be like where it starts.
Where it
is,
would
like
be
10 years
starting.
old.
How old are you? 10?
10. Yeah. I've had clients who are younger than 10, around 10, a little older than 10. And yeah, social media, there are just like really messed up like Reddit pages on social media.
That these kids have access
Yeah,
to.
so these kids have access to that basically teach you how to have an eating disorder, like
They groom
what
you.
you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. And so they read these things, they're in these spaces and these communities. And so it's really hard for me to get any other message across to them except for what they're reading and
Yeah, 'cause
engaging
when you're
in.
young too, like you
Yeah,
believe, like I
yeah.
mean,
Oh, it's like
You're also not
innocent
thinking about
mind.
Yeah.
you're not thinking about like 10 years from then. You're not thinking about any of that.
You're like thinking about the now.
You're thinking about the
as an
now.
me going in
adolescent.
the tanning bed in high school, I was like, I'm fine, and then I
Yeah.
got skin cancer at 25.
Yeah,
It's like,
you don't think about
Melanoma.
that.
Buddy, you could be
Yeah.
white, like
Which is why I created a curriculum, because the education around eating disorders, mental health, body image has to start in 4th, 5th, 6th, like middle school, high school. Like it has to be done, and it doesn't exist. Like I think about what I learned in high school around eating disorders, and it was maybe like a 20-minute lesson that was like for one day, and it was like anorexia, bulimia, like those were the two things, and that was it.
I wasn't told bang, boom,
exactly.
done.
I wasn't told what contributed to it, what causes them, where to go for help,
signs and symptoms,
exactly.
Like
things that like how to even know that it is potentially bad. I was just taught BMI. I was taught BMI in high school. I was taught the food pyramid. I was taught
the food pyramid is crap.
I'm dead. That I'm like, they're so outdated.
So outdated. I'm like, quit giving me a triangle.
Yeah. I'm like, this doesn't matter. This is not important.
Like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
I do have a question, and we're gonna get a little. What can the parents do to help these adolescents? Because to me, I like, God hasn't blessed me with kids yet, but I think, what can I do for my future that would help me like sustain like a good like mentally stable environment so that my kids get to
possibly avoid this?
Yes.
Or if it comes along, like how can we appropriately like
just go with it? Yeah. Like,
well, I think
parents now.
Yeah, I think the number one thing is being aware of how you talk about food, how you talk about your body, how you talk about other people's bodies around your kids, right?
Okay.
Like, I think about my experience. My mom never said anything negative about my body or my sister's bodies ever. But I learned my relationship with food and my body because of how my mom viewed and talked about her body. So I always tell parents, I'm like, you have to be aware of like what you're saying about, whether it's about them or it's about yourself or someone else. Like you have to be aware of the words you're using and what you're saying. Are you villainizing food? Are you, labeling food good and bad? Like that's a huge thing that I see with parents and clients, is clients being like, I grew up in a house where like this food was acceptable, this food was not acceptable. And that becomes sort of like habitual for them. And as they get older, they have this fear of these foods that were not allowed in their home. Or it's opposite, and they develop like binge eating disorder because they were restricted so much when they were younger.
Yeah, they couldn't have sweets.
They couldn't have certain things.
They didn't have sweet in the house.
I remember having friends like that.
Yeah, and then they go like ham in college, and you're like,
or they go to your house and you have a sweet, and then the kid's just like eating the whole box of Lucky Charms.
Like, oh my gosh!
Yeah,
it's true.
So there's going to be some impact either way. So I always tell parents, I'm like, find a way to like talk about food in a neutral way. Talk about bodies in a neutral way. If we can find like neutrality and not like add any like more like moral compass to food or your body, you're probably going to be pretty safe, because you're not teaching your kid what a good body is, what a bad body is, what good food is, what bad food is. Like you're just simply teaching them
how to nourish your bodies.
Yeah. This is how we nourish our bodies. This is how we listen to our body. All of those pieces.
So with that being said, if there was one thing, like one liner, one note that you could like say,
like just a one-liner to help us all out.
Or even the sentence, or just even a thought about
anything.
Your psycho eating disorders, like what would
mental health, eating disorder, just like
anything
one-line.
you want to say about it?
That's really hard, because
I know.
I feel like I can't do that in
one word.
sentence,
it could be like,
because this is a heavy subject, so we get it.
I guess like the biggest thing that I found to be super helpful for me, and that I find to be really helpful with clients, is that like worth piece and that like moral piece. Like we have to detach the size of our body and our relationship with food from the worth that we hold as a person. If we can unlearn that, and we can learn to really prioritize the important pieces of like who we are as a person, what we bring to the table, like our talents and our personality, like we are going to be genuinely authentically ourselves, and we're not going to be constantly trying to be a version of ourselves that we're not meant to be. And I think that's what I experienced. I was trying to be someone I wasn't. I was trying to look like someone I wasn't. And I had to come to this realization of like, there is literally only one of me there's not one other me in the entire world. And so why would I want to waste my life, this experience that I get to have on this planet, trying to be something that I'm not meant to be? Where instead I could embrace who I am, I could celebrate who I am, and I could find that like healthy relationship with like nourishing my body, taking care of my body as a form of like self-love, as a form of like, I appreciate you, right? Like instead of out of hatred, instead of out of this place of like, I want to be different, I want to look different. It's no, like, why don't I actually find this like deep-rooted love and acceptance for myself rather than like looking for that externally or from people who could not give a shit about me, right?
Just, like, and all of us just not be shit human beings and judge. Like I've taken a lot from this because I try to be a good person in society. Like I try my best, but like just don't be a crap human being and just stop judging.
What people are going
Keep
through.
your comments to yourself.
Like
we don't know.
We don't need any unsolicited advice. Like you commenting that someone should be eating this instead of this is not this like life-saving comment that you think it maybe is. It is actually just making things worse. So it's like, keep the comments to yourself, worry about yourself, stop trying to tell other people what they should or shouldn't do with their bodies, and just like, period. Like, leave it there.
That's her mic drop right there.
Yeah,
worry about yourself.
Just worry about yourself. Just worry about yourself.
It's so amazing. Like, thank you.
You're amazing.
Thank you for sharing everything, like your past, present, future.
Your professional knowledge on all this.
We appreciate you being on here so much, and like I know you definitely opened up our eyes and probably the eyes of many listeners. Where can we find you? Because
your social media
are going to be.
She's a content creator, people.
Go,
she's a
girl.
psychotherapist.
So you can find me on Instagram, TikTok at Just Recover with Carly, or you can go to my website, which is justrecoverwithcarly.com, and that basically
recoverwithcarly.com and Recover with Carly on Insta.
So they can see it.
And basically everything, curriculum, podcast, everything's linked on my website. So if that's easiest, then you can just go there.
We love it.
Oh,
we love it, and we love
so
you.
much.
Thank you so much. We appreciate having you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
The Newport Psycho.
Great.
Yes.
We want to know, do you have a psycho?
Person, place, or thing.
Send your submissions to
TEA at thenewportpsycho.com.
And you can be anonymous or you can be physically here.
We'd love for you to join us. Tell
Come
us,
on.
who's your psycho?
At the Newport Psycho.
Ah!